Hello guys, welcome to Ben 10 What Ifs. So in this video, we will see, what if Ben 10 was raised by Animo and created by Omnitrix? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Serpent's Apprentice. The syringe trembled in Benjamin's hand as he injected the fluorescent green serum into his forearm. Pain erupted like liquid lightning through his veins, the familiar agony of cellular reconstruction. His teeth clenched against a scream as his radius and ulna elongated beneath his skin, muscle fibers tearing and reforming with sickening pops. Respiratory adaptation at 43%, he gasped, fingers elongating into taloned appendages, scales erupting across his forearm in an emerald cascade. Musculature reconfiguration complete. The laboratory's harsh lights illuminated the transformation. Benjamin's eyes shifted, pupils contracting into vertical slits as nictitating membranes formed and slid sideways across his vision. The world became a thermal map overlaid with ultraviolet signatures invisible to human perception. 17 minutes, 14 seconds, drive. Animo noted clinically, his voice carrying that family AR blend of scientific detachment and perverse pride. A 12% improvement from last week's integration time. Benjamin flexed his partially transformed arm, watching scales ripple beneath the skin. Unlike previous iterations, the transformation had stabilized at the shoulder joint instead of spreading throughout his torso. Controlled limitation. Progress. The modified Ophiophagus Hana DNA is responding to the neural inhibitors, Benjamin observed, voice slightly distorted by the forked tongue now flicking between his lips. We've achieved localized transformation without complete cellular conversion. Doctor. Animo circled him, silver hair wild beneath his laboratory lights, eyes gleaming with the manic intensity that had terrified Benjamin as a child but now merely registered as familiar background radiation. 13 years under the man's tutelage had immunized him against the more obvious manifestations of his mentor's instability. The Bio-Omnitrix is achieving symbiosis with your nervous system, Animo declared, gesturing toward the device embedded in Benjamin's left wrist. Unlike the clunky prototype versions, this iteration appeared almost organic, a latticework of bioluminescent green pathways fused with his skin, pulsing with the same rhythm as his heartbeat. Benjamin exhaled slowly as the pain subsided to a dull throb. Limited King Cobra transformation provides enhanced reflexes, infrared vision, and venom production without sacrificing manual dexterity or higher cognitive functions. He demonstrated by deftly manipulating a complex molecular model on the nearby holographic display. His scaled fingers moving with inhuman precision. And the psychological effects. Animo pressed, his notepad ready. Benjamin hesitated. This was always the most difficult part of their sessions, the moment when scientific observation blurred with psychological violation. The truth was, with each transformation came not just physical alterations but instinctual shifts. He Cobra DNA whispered ancient predatory impulses through his neural pathways. Hunger, territory, heat-seeking aggression, he admitted reluctantly. But contained, compartmentalized. Animo scribbled notes furiously. Excellent. The suppression protocols are functioning adequately. Benjamin didn't mention the other sensations, how the room smelled different through his chemoreceptors, how he LD taste Animo's excitement in the air particles that touched his tongue, how part of him calculated the precise trajectory required to strike the carotid artery pulsing visibly in the doctor's neck. Instead, he focused on the thermal signature of the laboratory's ventilation system, counting the seconds until the transformation would naturally begin to recede. 27 minutes of viability before cellular degradation began, another record. Tomorrow we'll add the Varanus comodensis sequences, Animo announced, already moving to his genetic sequencer. The bacterial flora in Komodo saliva, combined with cobra neurotoxins, could produce a fascinating hemotoxic-neurotoxic hybrid venom. Benjamin nodded absently, his attention drifting to the laboratory's reinforced window. Outside, darkness had fallen across the abandoned missile silo they'd converted into their current research facility. This was their third relocation in 2 years, always staying ahead of the organizations hunting them. A flicker of memory invaded his consciousness. Sitting in a backyard, a man with his mother's smile pushing him on a swing, a woman calling his name, his real name, not the designation Animo used WH.N, introducing him to the various shadowy research funders and criminal organizations that supported their work. Your cognitive drift is increasing, Animo observed sharply. The limbic suppressors need adjustment. Benjamin forced his attention back to the laboratory. The transformation is stable. I'm simply planning for tonight's acquisition. Animo's expression softened marginally, as close to approval as he ever demonstrated. Ah yes, Howell Genetics. Their recent breakthrough in epigenetic markers makes their research quite valuable to our work. Benjamin flexed his scaled arm, watchy. As the transformation slowly began receding, scales retracting beneath pink human skin. The Omnitrix pulsed at his wrist, processing and archiving the genetic material for future transformations. I've memorized their security protocols, he said, activating a holographic display with a gesture. Their biometric scanners are calibrated for standard human readings, temperature, pulse, respiration. The serpent adaptations will render me effectively invisible to their detection systems. Animo nodded, seemingly satisfied. And what of the plumbers? Their recent activity suggests they're monitoring Howell. Benjamin's jaw tightened. The intergalactic peacekeeping force had become increasingly problematic in recent years. Unlike human law enforcement, they possessed technology sophisticated enough to potentially detect his biological signatures. I'll be in and out before they can mobilize, he replied, injecting confidence he didn't entirely feel into his voice. Besides, they're king for alien tech, not terrestrial genetic hybrids. Animo turned away, busying himself with preparations for the Komodo dragon sequence integration. Be certain that you are. I would hate to lose my most successful specimen after all these years of investment. The words landed like a physical blow, though Benjamin had long since learned to mask his reaction. Specimen. Not son. Not even apprentice. Just the most promising of countless experiments, many of which had ended in horrible failure over the years. As the transformation completely receded, Benjamin rolled down his sleeve to cover the Omnitrix. I'll prepare the extraction equipment. His mind drifted as he assembled the specialized containment units for the genetic samples. 13 years since Animo had taken him from that backyard. 13 years of needles and transformations and moving from one hidden laboratory to another. 13 years of being shaped into something neither fully human nor wholly animal, but something between, a chimera of Animo's design. The memories came unbidden, fragmentary and painful. Remarkable genetic structure, Animo had murmured, examining a sample under his microscope while 4-year-old Benjamin sobbed in his restraints. The boy's DNA shows unusual receptivity to recombination. Almost as though Animo had turned to him then, eyes alight with that terrifying hunger for knowledge that transcended ethics, morality, humanity itself. Do you know how special you are, Benjamin? Your body can accept genetic modifications that would kill ordinary humans. You're going to help me create a new world. The child had struggled against his bonds, crying for parents who would never find him. I want to go home. Animo's smile had contained neither warmth nor cruelty, just scientific fascination. This is your home now. And one day, you'll thank me for selecting you. Benjamin blinked away the memory, focusing instead on calibrating the extraction devices. He'd stopped crying during procedures by age 6. Stopped begging to go home by 8. By 12, he'd begun assisting with the genetic sequencing himself, his brilliant mind, enhanced by Animo's selective cognitive augmenta. Tions, grasping concepts that would challenge university professors. Now, at 17, Benjamin knew he was neither victim nor collaborator but something more complex, a creation gradually slipping beyond its creator's control. The Omnitrix pulsed at his wrist as though sensing his thoughts, the bioluminescent pathways briefly intensifying before settling back to their steady rhythm. Unlike the alien device that had inspired Animo's work, this was no mere transformation tool. It was becoming part of him, integrating with his nervous system, responding to his thoughts. Evolving. Just as he was. The extraction equipment is prepared, Benjamin announced, closing the reinforced case. Animo nodded, distracted by his work on the Komodo sequences. Return with the samples before dawn. I've programmed the perimeter security to expect you between 0300 and 0500 hours. Benjamin hesitated at the laboratory door. And if there are complications? The doctor didn't look up from his microscope. Then I'll begin sequencing a more promising specimen in the morning. The words hung in the air, neither threat nor joke but simple scientific pragmatism. Benjamin had seen the cold storage units Animo kept genetic samples from other children with similar potential, had helped catalog them himself. His replacement was merely a matter of logistics. Understood. Benjamin shouldered the a leased backpack and headed toward the elevator that would take him to the surface. The transformation would be complete by the time he reached the city. The University of Central Metro's Bioscience building appeared deserted at 1:42 a.m. But Benjamin knew better. The emergency lights that dotted the hallways illuminated the occasional graduate student or professor working late, their presence regis. Teared as heat signatures through the infrared-sensitive nictitating membranes that now overlaid his eyes. He moved silently, his body a perfect hybrid of human and serpent. The Omnitrix had evolved beyond Animo's original design, no longer requiring injections to trigger transformations. Now it responded to his mental commands, restructuring his DNA temporarily to incorporate the genetic NCES stored within its biological memory. His current form retained human appearance at a distance, important for maintaining cover if observed, but incorporated the Ophidian adaptations necessary for tonight's mission: infrared vision. Enhanced chemoreceptors in place of his tongue, scaled skin along his torso that dissipated heat signatures, and microscopic suction structures on his palms and feet. That allowed him to adhere to vertical surfaces. Benjamin paused at a junction, his tongue flicking out to taste the air. Two humans, approximately 30 meters ahead. Their biochemical signatures suggested fatigue, caffeine consumption, and the distinctive markers of stress hormones typical of academic researchers on deadline. He changed direction, moving toward an auxiliary laboratory he'd identified during earlier reconnaissance. Unlike the main research facilities, this smaller lab belonged to a graduate student working independently, someone with access to the main servers but fewer security protocols to navigate. The nameplate beside the door read, J. Yamamoto, Biomechanical Engineering. Benjamin listened carefully before disengaging the simple electronic lock with a specialized device of his own design. The room beyond was dark save for the glow of multiple computer monitors. Equipment cluttered every surface: 3D printers, molecular assemblers, and prototype devices in various stages of completion. He moved directly to the primary workstation, connecting his data extraction device to the main terminal. University systems were typically easier to access than corporate networks, particularly when. That's a novel approach to breaking and entering. Benjamin whirled, his body instantly dropping into a defensive posture, muscles coiling with explosive potential. A young woman stood in the doorway, one hand on the light switch, the other holding what appeared to be a makeshift stun baton. Most thieves don't bring sequencing tools to steal computers, she continued, her voice remarkably steady despite the obvious fear betrayed by her elevated heart rate. Benjamin could see it pulsing in her neck, along with the heat signature of adrenaline flooding her system. She was small-framed, Asian, approximately his age, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, eyes intelligent behind rectangular glasses. The laboratory coat suggested she was J. Yamamoto herself. "I'm not stealing computers," Benjamin replied, voice slightly distorted by his partially transformed vocal cords. "I'm accessing research data." Her eyes narrowed, gaze settling on his exposed forearm where scales gleamed in the dim light. "You're not entirely human." An unusually perceptive observation, delivered without the expected horror or disgust. Benjamin reassessed her, noting the specialized equipment surrounding them. Not standard bioengineering tools, these were designed for the integration of biological systems with mechanical components. "Neither is most of what you're developing here," he countered, nodding toward her workbench where what appeared to be a cardiac regulatory device incorporated distinctly non-standard components. A slight shift in her posture, surprise. "You can recognize biomechanical adaptive systems at a glance." Among other things, Benjamin kept his position between her and the computer. The data transfer was only 23% complete. "Your research incorporates organic semiconductors in ways the academic community hasn't officially recognized as viable." Her grip on the stun baton loosened slightly. "Because the academic community is painfully traditional." About maintaining the arbitrary boundary between biological and mechanical systems. Benjamin couldn't help the slight upward curl of his lip, not quite a smile, but recognition of something unexpected. In the years of isolation with only Animo for intellectual interaction, he'd forgotten that other minds might pursue parallel evolutionary paths. "You're ahead of published research by approximately 3 years, he observed, gesturing toward her prototype. "The neural interface you're developing could revolutionize the integration of prosthetics." Julie Yamamoto's eyes widened slightly before narrowing with suspicion. "You broke into my lab to steal my research." "No," Benjamin replied honestly. "I broke in to access the university's connection to Howell Genetics. Your research was an unexpected discovery." The data transfer reached 47%. Benjamin calculated his options. The woman was unlikely to present a physical threat. His enhanced reflexes could easily disarm her before she could deploy the stun baton, but something about her scientific innovation made him reluctant to respond with force. "Who are you?" she demanded, taking a cautious step into the laboratory. Benjamin hesitated. In 13 years, Animo had never allowed him to interact meaningfully with others. Specimens didn't require names or identities beyond their research parameters. Yet something about this moment, his intersection of isolation and recognition, prompted an unprecedented response. "Benjamin," he answered, the name feeling strange on his tongue after years of disuse. "Though most know me as Chimera." Julie's gaze traveled to his arm where the scales were now receding, the Omnitrix pulsing with increased activity. "Your transformation is destabilizing." The observation was clinically accurate and completely unexpected. Most humans would focus on the monstrosity of his transformation, not its technical specifications. Benjamin felt a sharp twist beneath his ribs, not physical pain, but something equally acute. A temporary fluctuation, he dismissed, though she was correct. The university's electromagnetic security systems were interfering with the Omnitrix's stability protocols. Within minutes, the transformation would begin breaking down prematurely. Julie set down the stun baton and moved toward one of her workbenches. The M-field generators in this building create a harmonic disruption pattern at 42.7 GHz. If your biological modifications are sensitive to that frequency range. She rummaged through a drawer and extracted a small device, adjusting several components with practiced precision. "This should create a localized dampening field," she explained, activating the device. "It won't last long on this power cell, but it might help stabilize whatever's happening to you." Benjamin stared at her, momentarily forgetting the data transfer. No one had ever attempted to help him before, not without Animo's explicit instructions and certainly not with his transformations. The dampening device hummed to life, and immediately the painful fluctuations in his cellular structure subsided. The scales stopped their erratic recession, stabilizing along his forearm. "That's effective," he acknowledged, genuine surprise coloring his tone. Julie studied him with open scientific curiosity, fear apparently forgotten in the face of an interesting biological puzzle. "Why, our transformation appears to have both biological and technological components. Some kind of symbiotic system." The data transfer reached 68%. Benjamin made a decision that Animo would certainly classify as experimental error. "It's called a Omnitrix," he explained, extending his arm to show her the bioluminescent pathways extending from his wrist. "It stores genetic sequences and allows rolled biological transformation through temporary DNA recombination." Julie's eyes widened. "That's theoretically impossible. The energy requirements for genetic restructuring at that scale would require approximately 200 kilojoules per second of active transformation," Benjamin completed. "The system utilizes a specialized cellular battery derived from electric eel physiology, combined with a biological supercapacitor structure." Quote, "For the first time in his life, Benjamin experienced the strange pleasure of discussing his biology with someone who viewed it with fascination rather than clinical detachment or horror." Julie moved closer, her fear apparently forgotten in the face of unprecedented scientific discovery. "The integration with your nervous system must be extensive," she observed, studying the glowing pathways that extended beneath his skin. "Increasingly so," Benjamin confirmed. "The system evolves with each transformation, becoming more integrated with my biological functions." The data transfer reached 82%, but Benjamin found himself uncharacteristically distracted from his mission parameters. Julie's questions were insightful, her understanding of biomechanical systems impressive. For perhaps the first time, he was engaged in genuine intellectual exchange rather than Animo's one-sided lectures. "Your transformation is still degrading, just more slowly," she noted, pointing to where the scales were beginning to recede again. "The dampening field isn't a permanent solution." Benjamin nodded. "The Cobra DNA sequence is particularly sensitive to electromagnetic interference. It's why I typically avoid university facilities." Julie tilted her head, considering. "I might be able to modify the resonance frequency of your transformation matrix if you'd allow me to examine the control mechanism more closely." The offer was so unexpected that Benjamin momentarily forgot his mission parameters. The idea of anyone besides Animo interacting with the Omnitrix was unprecedented, dangerous even. Yet Julie's understanding of biomechanical interfaces potentially offered solutions to stabilization issues that Animo, focused purely on genetics, had never adequately addressed. The data transfer completed with a soft chime. Benjamin disconnected the device, tucking it into his pocket. "Another time, perhaps," he said, surprised to realize he meant it. "I to complete my primary objective tonight." Julie nodded, disappointment evident in her expression. "Howell Genetics, you said. They've been recruiting heavily from our bioengineering department. Quote, their recent breakthrough in epigenetic markers has applications to my condition." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "You're looking to stabilize your transformations permanently." Benjamin didn't confirm or deny, though her assessment was partially correct. What she couldn't know was that stability was merely a precursor to Animo's true objective, creating a viable method for permanent genetic hybridization across multiple species simultaneously. The Chimera Project's ultimate goal. "You should go," Julie said suddenly, glancing at her watch. "Campus security does rounds at 2:15. Benjamin moved toward the window rather than the door. "If you mention this encounter to anyone." "I won't," she interrupted, then added with a small smile. "Scientific breakthroughs happen when researchers share information, not when they threaten each other." Something unfamiliar stirred in Benjamin's chest, a sensation the Omnitrix couldn't classify or suppress. For 13 years, his interactions had been limited to Animo's clinical assessments and the hostile intentions of security forces. Julie's response existed outside his experiential parameters. "Perhaps our research interests will intersect again," he said, surprising himself with the sentiment. Julie's smile widened slightly. "I'm here most nights. Biomechanical adaptive systems don't develop themselves." Benjamin nodded once, then slipped through the window into the night. The Cobra transformation would last approximately 18 more minutes, sufficient time to reach the Howell Genetics facility on the other side of the research district. As he moved across the rooftops with inhuman grace, Benjamin found his thoughts returning to the unexpected encounter. Julie Yamamoto represented something he'd never experienced before, someone who viewed his transformed state with scientific interest rather than fear or clinical detachment. The sensation was not unpleasant. Howell Genetics occupied a gleaming 12-story building at the center of Central Metro's research district. Unlike the university's modest security measures, Howell employed state-of-the-art systems, motion sensors, thermal imaging cameras, biometric scanners, and armed guards, none of which were calibrated to detect a genetic hybrid with reptilian thermo-receptive capabilities. Benjamin clung to the exterior of the building, 17 floors above the street. His partially scaled hands and feet adhered effortlessly to the smooth glass surface as he bypassed the rooftop security entirely. According to his intelligence, the epigenetic research samples were stored in a specialized containment vault on the 11th floor, accessible through the environmental control system rather than main corridors. He located the external access panel for the building's ventilation system, using a specialized tool to silently remove the cover. The Cobra transformation was beginning to recede now, but he'd calculated sufficient duration to complete the Tion before reverting completely to human form. The ventilation shaft was narrow but navigable. Benjamin moved silently through the metal corridors, his serpentine adaptations allowing him to sense temperature variations that indicated security measures. When he reached the processing center above the 11th floor, he paused. Something was wrong. The security protocols he'd memorized included regular guard rotations and standard sensor arrays. But his thermal vision detected additional heat signatures throughout the floor, at least 6 armed individuals moving with military precision rather than the casual patterns of security guards. Benjamin hesitated. Animo's instructions had been clear: acquire the samples and avoid detection. Additional armed presence suggested complications that exceeded mission parameters. The logical choice was to abort the mission and return with this intelligence. Yet returning empty-handed meant another of Animo's coldly disappointed assessments. Another reminder that he was merely an experimental asset rather than a person. Another delay in his plans to stabilize the Omnitrix. Benjamin made his decision. He would proceed with modified parameters. He continued through the ventilation system until he reached the access point directly above the cold storage vault. Through the grate, he could see the laboratory below, immaculate workstations, advanced sequencing equipment, and the reinforced door of the sample storage unit. He also saw a woman moving methodically through the laboratory, placing what appeared to be surveillance devices at strategic locations. Her movements betrayed professional training, her equipment far more advanced than standard corporate espionage tools. Benjamin observed her for several minutes. Dark hair pulled back in a tight braid, athletic build, customized tactical gear without identifying insignia. She moved with practiced efficiency, sweeping the room with some kind of scanning device before approaching the sample storage unit. A professional rival, then. Someone else seeking the epigenetic breakthrough. Benjamin could simply wait for her to complete her acquisition, then intercept her outside the facility. Yet something about her methodical approach suggested military precision, potentially government affiliation. That complicated matters significantly. He decided on direct confrontation. The ventilot ion grate detached silently under his careful manipulation. Benjamin dropped into the laboratory without a sound, landing in a predatory crouch directly behind the woman. "Those samples won't help you," he said quietly. Her reaction was impressively fast. The woman spun, drawing a sidearm that distinctly wasn't standard issue for any law enforcement agency Benjamin recognized. It hummed with energy as she leveled it at his chest. "Chimera," she said, recognition flashing across her features. "Dr. Animo's pet project." Benjamin tensed. Few people knew that designation, fewer still would connect it to Animo. "You seem to have me at a disadvantage." Her eyes narrowed, weapon remaining perfectly steady. "Elena Validus. And you're interfering with a plumber's operation." The name registered immediately in Benjamin's mental catalog. Elena Validus, daughter of renowned plumber agent Victor Validus before his mysterious disappearance 3 years ago. Now apparently following in her father's footsteps. "The plumbers have no jurisdiction over terrestrial genetic research," Benjamin countered, slowly straightening to his full height. The Cobra transformation was fading rapidly now, scales receding beneath his skin. But his reflexes remained enhanced. "These samples contain no alien genetic material." "No, but they're being funded by a group that specializes in weaponizing both human and alien genetic material," Elena replied, her weapon tracking his movement. "A group called Servatus. Perhaps you've heard of them. Your mentor has taken their money often enough." Benjamin kept his expression neutral despite the unexpected information. Animo had never discussed his funding sources in detail, describing them merely as interested parties with appropriate resources. "If that's true, then we have a mutual interest," he said carefully. "I have no desire to see these epigenetic markers weaponized." Elena's laugh lacked humor. "Right. That's why Animo's prized experiment is here in the middle of the night. For the good of humanity." The Omnitrix pulsed at Benjamin's wrist, responding to his elevated heart rate. The remnants of the Cobra transformation were accelerating their recession, his body returning to fully human form more rapidly than anticipated. He needed to conclude this encounter quickly. "My interests and Animo's aren't always aligned," Benjamin said, surprising himself with the admission. Something flickered in Elena's expression: reassessment. "The samples aren't here anyway. Howell moved them after we detected Servatus' interest. This is a trap." As if summoned by her words, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red emergency lights bathed the laboratory, and Benjamin's enhanced hearing detected the sound of multiple teams converging on their location. "Servatus security forces," Elena confirmed grimly. They've been waiting for someone to make a move on the samples. Benjamin processed this information rapidly. How many? At least 3 tactical teams. 12 operators. Heavy weapons, probably gene tech dampening equipment. The last item was particularly concerning. Dampening technology could potentially disrupt the Omnitrix, leaving Benjamin without his transformative abilities. Already the Cobra adaptations had almost completely receded. We need to move, he decided. The ventilation system connects to the mechanical room on the 14th floor. From there, we can access the emergency stairwell on the east side. Alina's eyebrow raised slightly. Unless you'd prefer to explain to Servatus why you're interfering with their acquisition. The sound of boots in the corridor outside made the decision for her. Elena holstered her weapon and moved toward the ventilation access point. Benjamin interlaced his fingers to give her a boost up, which she accepted with a grudging nod. If you try anything, she warned as she pulled herself into the shaft, you'll find plumbers have a few genetic tricks of our own. Benjamin followed her into the ventilation system, pulling the grate closed behind them just as the laboratory door burst open. Through the slats, he glimpsed heavily armed operatives in unmarked tactical gear, Servatus security forces. According to Elena, they moved through the cramped ventilation shafts in silence, Benjamin leading based on his memorized schematics of the building. His Cobra transformation had completely receded now, leaving him fully human except for the Omnitrix pulsing at his wrist. That device, Elena whispered as they paused at a junction. It's not Galvan technology. Benjamin glanced at his wrist. No, it's a terrestrial alternative, biological rather than mechanical. Animo's attempting to recreate the Omnitrix through genetic engineering, she concluded. Not a question but an assessment. Something like that. They continued moving, the sounds of the security teams growing more distant as they navigated away from the 11th floor. Benjamin led T.H.M. through a series of tight turns before reaching a larger junction that opened into the mechanical room. As they dropped into the spacious area filled with humming equipment, Elena immediately moved to a defensive position, checking sight lines and potential threats. Her tactical training was evident in every movement, professional, thorough, efficient. The emergency stairwell is through that door, Benjamin indicated. It should take us directly to the loading dock on the ground level. Elena studied him with open suspicion. Why are you helping me escape? I'm a plumber, the exact organization Animo has been evading for years. Benjamin considered his response carefully. The truth was, he wasn't entirely sure himself. Logically, allowing Elena to be captured by Servatus would eliminate a potential threat to Animo's operations. Yet something about the situation, and perhaps about Elena herself, had prompted a different calculation. Servatus represents a greater immediate threat, he said finally. And I'm curious about your claim that they're funding Animo's research. Elena seemed about to respond when the mechanical room's main door burst open. 4 Servatus operatives rushed in, weapons raised. Benjamin reacted instinctively, diving for cover behind a massive air-handling unit as gunfire erupted. Chimera identified, one operative shouted into his comm system. Deploying gene tech suppressors. Benjamin felt it immediately, a high-frequency pulse that sent waves of nauseating pain through his nervous system. The Omnitrix flickered at his wrist, its bioluminescent pathways dimming as the suppression field interfered with its functionality. Elena had taken cover behind an electrical panel, returning fire with her plumber-issue weapon. The energy blasts forced the Servatus team to scatter, buying them precious seconds. Any other transformations available? Elena called over the cacophony. Benjamin grimaced, attempting to activate the Omnitrix. The device pulsed weakly, attempting to initiate a transformation sequence but failing to complete the genetic restructuring under the influence of the suppression field. Not while they're using gene tech suppressors, he replied, calculating their diminishing options. Elena fired another series of blasts, then ducked back as return fire riddled her position. Then we do this the old-fashioned way. To Benjamin's surprise, she tossed him a small device, a plumber standard issue stun grenade. Their eyes met briefly across the chaotic space, a moment of unexpected cooperation between natural enemies. Benjamin nodded once, primed the grenade, and threw it with perfect accuracy into the midst of the Servatus team. Elena simultaneously fired at the room's main power junction. The dual assault, blinding flash. from the grenade and sudden darkness as the power failed, created momentary chaos. Benjamin moved instantly, years of Animo's combat training taking over as he navigated through the darkness. His hearing, still slightly enhanced from lingering Cobra DNA, allowed him to locate the disoriented Servatus operatives. He incapacitated two with precise strikes to vulnerable pressure points, unconscious but alive. Across the room, he could hear Elena engaged with the others, her combat style efficient and economical. When emergency lighting activated 30 seconds later, all 4 Servatus operatives lay unconscious. Elena was already moving toward the emergency exit, gesturing for Benjamin to follow. Their backup teams will converge on this position in approximately 40 seconds, she said. They descended the emergency stairwell rapidly, Benjamin noting that Elena favored her left side slightly, likely from an impact during the brief combat. Despite this, she maintained an impressive pace, her conditioning evidently excellent even by plumber standards. Why would Servatus fund Animo's research while simultaneously hunting you? Elena asked as they reached the 3rd floor landing. I don't think they're hunting me specifically. Benjamin replied, listening for pursuit. They're likely after the Omnitrix technology. Animo isn't known for loyalty to his financial backers. Elena snorted. That's putting it mildly. He's betrayed everyone he's ever worked with. Including me, Benjamin thought but didn't say. They reached the ground floor loading dock without further incident, slipping through the emergency exit into the cool night air. Distant sirens suggested local law enforcement was responding to the facility's alarms, a complication neither of them needed. We should separate here, Benjamin said, already calculating the fastest route back to Animo's laboratory. The suppression field's effects are temporary. Once I'm clear of the building, the Omnitrix should reactivate. Elena studied him with an expression he couldn't quite interpret. You're going back to him. After learning he's working with Servatus. It wasn't a question, but Benjamin felt compelled to answer anyway. I need to confirm your information. And I have my own reasons for continuing Animo's research. The Omnitrix is killing you, Elena said bluntly. I've studied enough genetic science to recognize cellular degradation patterns. The transformations are becoming more difficult to control, aren't they? Benjamin stiffened. Her assessment was uncomfortably accurate. Recent transformations had indeed become increasingly unstable, with longer recovery periods and occasional unwanted side effects persisting after reverting to human form. I'm managing the integration challenges, he said neutrally. Elena shook her head. The plumbers have resources, technology that could help stabilize your condition without Animo's crude methodologies. In exchange for what? Becoming a plumber laboratory specimen instead of Animo's. In exchange for helping us stop Servatus from weaponizing genetic technology on a global scale, Elena countered. Including whatever breakthrough they're funding Animo to develop. Benjamin hesitated. The offer was tempting in ways he hadn't anticipated. The plumbers' advanced technology might indeed provide solutions to the Omnitrix's increasing integration issues. Yet years under Animo's influence had instilled a deep skepticism of authority, especially intergalactic authority. I need to investigate Animo's connection to Servatus first, he said finally. If what you've told me is accurate. He left the sentence unfinished, unwilling to commit himself further. Elena seemed to understand nevertheless. When you're ready to talk, use this, she said, pressing a small communication device into his hand. It's secure and untraceable. I'm taking a significant risk trusting you with this, Chimera. The use of his designation rather than his name shouldn't have bothered him, it was. After all, how most people referred to him in the rare instances of direct interaction. Yet after briefly experiencing recognition as Benjamin with Julie Yamamoto earlier that night, the return to Chimera felt strangely diminishing. Benjamin, he corrected, surprising himself. My name is Benjamin. Something softened in Elena's expression, a brief glimpse behind the professional plumber facade. Benjamin, then, don't wait too long to make your decision. Servatus is accelerating their timeline, and Animo's work is central to whatever they're planning. Distant shouts and the sound of approaching vehicles prompted them to separate without further discussion. Benjamin slipped into the shadows between buildings, making his way through service alleys and across rooftops as the Omnitrix gradually reactivated, its bioluminescent pathways regaining their normal intensity. By the time he reached the outskirts of the city, the device had recovered sufficiently to attempt another transformation. Benjamin selected a DNA sequence optimized for speed and endurance, a hybridization of cheetah and human physiologies that would allow him to cover the remaining distance to Animo's laboratory rapidly. As his muscles reconfigured and specialized tendons formed along his legs, Benjamin's mind processed the night's unexpected developments. Julie Yamamoto, with her biomechanical innovations that might stabilize his transformations. Elena Validis with her claims about Servatis funding and Plummer resources. Both representing possibilities beyond Animo's laboratory, beyond being merely a successful specimen. The transformation completed, Benjamin dropped to all fours and accelerated to over 60 miles per hour, his altered physiology perfectly adapted for rapid ground transport. The night blurred around him as he raced toward the abandoned missile silo, uncertainty competing with a strange new sensation in his chest. For the first time in 13 years, Benjamin allowed himself to consider alternatives to Animo's plan for his future. Dangerous thoughts. Thoughts that the Omnitrix couldn't suppress no matter how many inhibitors Animo integrated into the system. Thoughts of freedom. Animo was waiting in the main laboratory when Benjamin returned shortly before dawn, the doctor's expression a familiar mixture of scientific curiosity and disappointment. "You're later than expected," he observed, noting Benjamin's disheveled appearance. "And you've used the Asinonyx Jubitus transformation without authorization." Benjamin placed the D-ATA extraction device on the laboratory bench. There were complications at Howell Genetics. The samples had been moved. Servatis security teams were waiting. Animo's expression remained impassive. Benjamin detected a slight acceleration in his heart rate, visible through the lingering enhancements of his recent transformation. "Servatis. How unfortunate," Animo said, examining the data device rather than meeting Benjamin's gaze. "Did you obtain any useful information?" "The data extraction from the university network was successful," Benjamin reported, carefully observing his mentor's reaction. "But I'm more interested in your connection to Servatis, Doctor. Particularly their funding of our research." Animo's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "Where did you hear that designation? Does it matter? Is it true?" The laboratory fell silent except for the quiet hum of equipment. 13 years of conditioning urged Benjamin to apologize for the insubordination, to resume his role as the compliant specimen. Yet the events of the night had shifted something fundamental in his perception. "Scientific research requires funding," Animo said finally, his tone carefully measured. "Servatis appreciates the potential applications of our work without imposing arbitrary ethical constraints. Applications like weaponized genetic modification," Benjamin pressed. "Human-animal hybrid soldiers." Animo waved a hand dismissively. "A limited vision of what we're creating. The Omnitrix represents the next stage of human evolution, adaptability on demand, species-level resilience against environmental threats. The transcendence of fixed biological limitations. And Servatis just wants to help humanity achieve this transcendence out of altruism." Animo's expression hardened. "Your tone suggests insubordination, Specimen 10. Perhaps the limbic suppressors require adjustment." The designation struck Benjamin like a physical blow. Specimen 10. Not even chimera, the name with at least a pretense of individuality, but a numerical designation. A research parameter. "The suppressors are functioning within expected parameters," Benjamin replied, forcing his voice to remain steady. "I see. MPLY require additional information to optimize mission performance." The explanation seemed to satisfy Animo, who turned back to his workstation. "Your encounter with Servatis security is concerning but not unexpected. They've been monitoring potential sources of epigenetic research that might complement our work." "Complement or co-opt?" Animo glanced at him sharply. "Your linguistic patterns show unusual deviation tonight. Did something happen during your mission that you haven't reported?" Benjamin hesitated, calculating the risks of disclosure versus concealment. Animo would eventually discover the truth through the Omnitrix's data logs. The device recorded all transformation activities and physiological responses. "I encountered a plumber agent at Howell Genetics," he admitted. "Elena Validis. She claimed the plumbers are investigating Servatis operations." Animo's expression darkened. "Validis. Victor's daughter. Interesting that she's following her father's misguided path." He activated a security protocol on his computer system, initiating what appeared to be a laboratory relocation sequence. This complicates our timeline. If the plumbers are actively investigating Servatus, they may trace the connection back to our work. She offered plumber resources to help stabilize the Omnitrix, Benjamin added, watching carefully for Animo's reaction. It was immediate and severe. You engaged in extended dialogue with a plumber agent. Did you disclose any information about our research? Only what she already knew, Benjamin replied calmly. Which was considerable. The plumbers have apparently been monitoring your work for some time. Animo's face flushed with anger. Intergalactic interference in human evolution. Always meddling, always limiting, always afraid of true progress. He turned his attention fully to Benjamin, eyes narrowing. And did this plumber agent suggest you might be better served under their protection than mine? The suggestion was made. And your response? Benjamin held Animo's gaze steadily. I returned here with the extracted data and reported the encounter, as protocol requires. Animo studied him for several long moments, clearly searching for signs of deception. Finally, he nodded once. Prepare for relocation sequence beta. We'll move to the secondary facility immediately. The university data may still prove useful despite the Howl setback. Benjamin inclined his head in acknowledgement and moved toward his assigned preparation area. As he gathered the specialized equipment required for transporting the Omnitrix development materials, his fingers brushed against the small communication device Elena had given him, now hidden in his pocket. A choice was forming, one he'd never truly believed would be possible. The Omnitrix pulsed at his wrist as though sensing his thoughts, the biological computer becoming increasingly responsive to his emotional states despite Animo's suppressors. Benjamin's gaze drifted to the laboratory's reinforced window, where the first rays of dawn were beginning to break across the horizon. Beyond that light lay Julie Yamamoto with her biomechanical innovations, Elena Validus with her plumber resources. And perhaps others who would see him as more than Specimen 10. For the first time, Benjamin allowed himself to imagine a future not dictated by Animo's vision of transcendent evolution. A dangerous thought, but one the Omnitrix seemed to respond to with increased luminescence, as though the device itself approved of this new directive. As Animo busied himself with securing research materials, Benjamin activated a hidden function in the Omnitrix, a subroutine he'd secretly programmed over months of clandestine work. The device briefly interfaced with Animo's computer system, extracting and copying critical research files without triggering security protocols. Knowledge was survival, and Benjamin was no longer certain his survival was compatible with Animo's vision. As he continued preparations for relocation, Benjamin's enhanced hearing caught a faint sound from Animo's private laboratory area, a sound that shouldn't have been possible in their supposedly isolated facility. A child's voice, muffled and distant, followed by Animo's soothing response. Benjamin froze, focusing his still enhanced auditory capabilities on the exchange. Just a few more tests, young one. Your genetic structure shows even greater potential than Specimen 10's did at your age. I want my mommy, the child's voice replied, trembling with fear and confusion. You'll thank me one day, Animo assured the child, his voice carrying the same clinical detachment he'd used with Benjamin 13 years earlier. You're going to help create a new world. The words struck Benjamin like a physical blow, memory and present reality collapsing into a single, clarifying moment. Another child, another abduction, another specimen in Animo's evolutionary vision. The Omnitrix pulsed rapidly at Benjamin's wrist, responding to his sudden spike in heart rate and adrenaline. Without conscious decision, he felt the device initiating a transformation sequence, responding not to external command but to his emotional state for the first time. As Animo returned to the main laboratory, he found Benjamin standing motionless, the Omnitrix glowing with unprecedented intensity. Scales erupted across his skin in an emerald cascade, but unlike previous transformations, these spread in a controlled pattern, not random recombination but directed evolution. Specimen 10, what are you doing? Animo demanded, reaching for the override controller he kept on his belt. The relocation sequence is initiated. Transformation activities are not authorized at this time. Benjamin turned slowly to face his creator, his eyes now vertical slits glowing with bioluminescent intensity. There's another child in your private laboratory. Animo's expression flickered, surprise quickly masked by scientific detachment. Merely a precautionary acquisition. The plumber interference accelerates our need for backup genetic templates. A replacement, Benjamin translated, his voice distort. Ed by the partial transformation of his vocal cords. In case your primary specimen proves unreliable. Scientific progress requires redundancy, Animo replied coldly, activating the override controller. Your emotional response demonstrates precisely why the limbic suppressors are necessary. Nothing happened. The Omnitrix continued its transformation sequence, unresponsive to the override signal. Animo's eyes widened with the first genuine fear Benjamin had ever seen in his mentor's expression. What have you done to the control protocols? Evolution, Doctor, Benjamin replied, continuing his transformation. Natural selection, adaptation. A mirthless smile revealed elongated canines. Isn't that what you've always wanted? For the first time in 13 years, Benjamin made a choice entirely his own, one not dictated by Animo's experimental parameters or survival calculations. The Omnitrix responded to his intent rather than clinical direction, initiating a hybridizatio N sequence that incorporated elements of multiple DNA samples simultaneously. As Animo backed toward the emergency containment controls, Benjamin completed his transformation into something unprecedented. Ted, a chimera of his own design rather than his creator's. You've spent 13 years teaching me about evolution, Doctor, Benjamin said, advancing slowly toward the man who had shaped his existence. Perhaps it's time I demonstrated just how well I've learned those lessons. The Omnitrix pulsed in perfect synchronization with his heartbeat, creator and creation facing each other across the laboratory as dawn broke fully across the horizon. The serpent's apprentice had outgrown his cage. Blank. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.